In November last year, after a highly publicised legal battle, Britney Spears was freed from a brutal 13-year-long conservatorship that put her father in charge of her finances, her healthcare and her personal decisions, effectively her entire life. Well, since then, she celebrated her freedom by posting pictures to her 41 million followers on Instagram. Naked pictures. Well, last week alone, she's posted a series of them. Concerned fans have flocked to social media, as they always love to do. Is Britney okay? Is she having another mental breakdown? Well, I don't think she is. I wrote a column for The Sun this week saying, actually, I think she's expressing the freedom she didn't have for all those years of that conservatorship, which became incredibly draconian. But to discuss all this, I'm joined by music management legend Louis Walsh, his words, not mine, who actually walked with Britney as a judge on X Factor USA in 2012, and Fox Nation host Tommy Lahren, who's an unashamed Britney fan. Well, let's start with you, Tommy. You know, I looked at these pictures. I've got to say, my first reaction was to be a bit concerned. It's like, what's she doing? Because she's got a history of erratic behaviour. But actually, when I read the captions and I saw what she was sort of saying about it, I genuinely felt this is a woman who feels liberated. And she always talked about the time of the conservatorship as being like being in prison. What do you think?
I'm free Britney all the way. She's living her life. She's loving her life. And you know what, Piers? What celebrity doesn't post nude photos or suggestive photos? I mean, scroll through and pick a name, any name. Pick a Kardashian, any Kardashian.
I don't.
They're all posting this kind of stuff. Is it a little bizarre? Sure, it's a little bizarre, but with all the craziness that goes on in Hollywood and in the media with public figures, let Britney be Britney. She's not hurting anybody. She's enjoying her freedom, and let her freak flag fly if she so chooses. It's all up to her. Thank goodness she is finally free.
Yeah, I kind of feel that. Louis, you've got a history with Britney because you did judge X Factor USA with her, and it was a bit of a nightmare, wasn't it? She did one show, I think, and over 2 days was sort of completely out of it, a bit of a diva about everything, and you were worried and maybe
she wasn't in...
Yeah. Tell me about it.
She wasn't in a good place. She wasn't in a good place. But, you know, I'm a fan as well, Piers, and she's a complete survivor. She's 40 years old. She can do whatever she wants. Madonna's taking all her clothes off all the time. Why can't Britney do it, you know? And I just think she's enjoying her life, you know, and she's free. But I'd like her to make a record. I'd like her to have a hit song, get back in studio with Mix Martin or somebody.
Yeah, because I remember watching her perform on the X Factor UK 2 or 3 years before you judged it. I think 2008, 9, something like that. And it was a really shocking performance. And she was only about 27. I thought, this is the beginning of the end. You know, it's really all over for her.
Yeah, I remember.
But when I look at her now...
We tried to...
Yeah, when I look at it now, though, Louis, I think, you know, one great song, and it could be one of the all-time great comebacks, right?
Totally. Max Martin, Britney, you get a hit. Absolutely. And she is a great pop star. She's a household name. She's got really loyal fans, you know, and she can do what she wants. So who's taking the pictures, by the way? It's not her. So it must be her guy.
Well, I mean, she's been with this guy, Tommy, for 5 years. She's pregnant, expecting another baby. Let me just ask you, though, Tommy, even as a sort of super fan, does any part of any of this worry you a little bit in the sense that when someone does get liberated after so long under someone's control, like her father, you know, it can go wrong? Are you worried it might, or do you trust the process here?
I think that, you know, obviously the posts are a little weird. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a Britney fan. I look at them and, you know, I cringe from time to time. But like I said, what celebrity isn't posting weird stuff? What celebrity isn't erratic? We've got so many other celebrities and pop stars and figures changing their gender from one day to the next. Let Britney do what she wants to do. She was miserable under that conservatorship. She said she was miserable. She was acute enough to understand she was miserable in that conservatorship. So you know what? If she's happy now, that's all that matters. Of course, we hope that the family and friends that she's still close to, we hope that they're watching over her, and we want the best for Britney, but I think she's going to make a huge comeback. I think she's going to be stronger than ever, and she's going to do it on her terms.
I just realised you actually look a bit like Britney.
Yeah.
Hey, I take that as a major compliment.
I intended it as a compliment. Louis, I've got to ask you before I let you go. Simon Cowell is on the verge of a truly historic moment where it looks like he may actually get married. Do you believe it's going to happen? What's your thought about this?
I don't know. Piers, you know him as much as I do, you know? He loves himself more than anybody else, you know? So Lauren is hanging in there a long time. Maybe he should get married. I don't know. He told me he never would. So I don't know. He's engaged. Lauren deserves it. She's hung around a long time. She deserves it.
She's a lovely lady, actually, Lauren. She's a lovely lady. I've got a feeling he is actually going to finally crumble.
Do you think so?
I think so, yeah.
Do you think he'll get married? Are you going to go?
I don't know. I mean, he's so tight, isn't he? Would you invite anyone to come and drink at his expense? We'd have to see.
We'll have to go. We'll have to go, even if we're not invited.
We should actually be best men, me and you. After all we've done for him for the last 30 years, we should, or we could be wedding crashers. We could be wedding crashers if he's too mean to invite us. Tommy, I want to take you back before we let you go, Tommy. You talked about every celebrity has naked pictures on social media. I don't know if you were familiar with my own work in this genre. So here's my famous Burger King commercial. Which was me in a Burt Reynolds loincloth by a roaring hearth fire. And if you believe that's my real body, you're living in cloud cuckoo land. But anyway, you're right, Tommy, we've all done it. Got to leave it there. Great debate. I'm glad to see Britney back. I think she's one of the all-time great pop stars. Take care, both of you, Tommy and Louis. Appreciate it. Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. When Dustin Hoffman stayed up for 3 days straight to appear tired for his role in Marathon Man, the great Laurence Olivier famously retorted, "My dear boy, have you tried acting?" I mean, that is the job of an actor, right? But some think that gay roles, for example, should only be played by gay actors, and disabled roles by disabled actors, trans roles by trans actors, and presumably, by that logic, Nazi roles by Nazi actors. Or is that ridiculous? Is all of it ridiculous? It's a peculiar kind of method acting zealotry, and it's happening more and more often. It would consider, for example, this sort of scene offensive.
You know what a woman said to me in the casino today? She asked me if I was Liberace's son.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Come here.
No.
Come here.
No.
No,
girl, you don't get anything.
Oh, yes,
you get nothing like it.
That was Matt Damon and Michael Douglas, both obviously in Liberace, both acting. Now, my next guest is a gay man who says his career suffered because Hollywood, that great liberal bastion of tolerance and fairness, couldn't grasp or tolerate or be fair about his ability to play it straight. He's, of course, director-producer. Movie superstar Rupert Everett. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you.
When you watch, as a gay man, you watch that scene from Candelabra, the Liberace film. To me, as a straight guy, it seemed very sensitively done, very realistic. You?
Yeah, and more than that, for me, watching that film, I was very moved by the amount of work and detail that those two actors bothered to put into their research, the way they attacked the roles. I was elated by it. And there's many examples of fantastic straight actors playing great gay roles, and then there's some less good. And I think the question is more, why can't gay actors play straight roles?
Right.
That's the thing that
Because
interests
what happened
me.
to you was fascinating, because when you were deemed to be straight, you got all these romantic leads in Hollywood, everyone loved you, and you were the Hugh Grant of your... If you don't mind the comparison, I would find that pretty repellent. But anyway, no, I've said it, it's out there. You were the Hugh Grant of your day, and then you came out, and suddenly it was like, what, no more work for you, son. We can't have you as a straight romantic lead.
I don't think it was actually quite like that, to be honest. But the thing that was very frustrating when I had my kind of big Hollywood moment, which was playing a gay best friend and being gay, it was at that point very difficult to graduate. I knew I had to try and graduate to playing something else apart from just that role. And it felt that it was more or less impossible. So my question is, I don't think gay actors should just play the gay roles. But the gay actors should be able to play the straight roles too. I think some straight guys play great gay roles.
And it's not just about the gay roles and gay actors and so on. I want to show some pictures here from other movies. Tom Hanks, for example, in Philadelphia, actually is an example of that. But Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, to me, it was an incredibly powerful movie, which shone an unbelievably bright light on the issue of AIDS. And what Tom Hanks did, I thought, he played the role magnificently. But more importantly, he brought tremendous numbers of eyeballs to watch it because he's Tom Hanks.
And it was a riskier period to do that as well. I mean, when Michael Douglas and Matt Damon did the Candelabra movie, things had changed substantially.
Yes.
when he did that film, it wasn't really a subject that people
But
talked about.
would a gay man have played that any more powerfully? And was there a gay actor out at the time, for example, who would have got the box office success that Tom Hanks brought?
Well,
and therefore, the light that was shone on the issue.
This is the other question. You know, people forget that Hollywood is a business. So, for example, when Scarlett Johansson was stopped from playing a trans role, there simply wasn't a trans actress at that point big enough to sustain a $50-60 million movie. I found that was a mistake of the trans community because there were probably lots of other trans roles in the film that would have been played by trans actresses, and Scarlett Johansson wasn't going to be doing some portrait that was anti-trans. So I felt it was slightly blinkered attitude.
Eddie Redmayne had a similar thing with the Danish girl. You know, he got into trouble for that from the trans community.
But the question there is, he started the role as a boy, so who's going to play the boy part? Right. The problem with that movie, in the end, is it was just dull.
Right, which is another crime altogether. But Eddie Redmayne also played Stephen Hawking, for example, and that was an amazingly powerful,
fantastic performance.
Role. And again, shone a huge light on that particular affliction which Stephen Hawking had. And I felt did it brilliantly. Now, I don't know why it would need to be somebody who's got that condition that Stephen Hawking had, motor neuron disease or a variant of it, to be as effective or more effective than Eddie Redmayne could be.
Well, I don't think it could have been, because someone with that condition just wouldn't be able to to be out there on the set from 6 in the morning till 8 at night. I just played a role of someone who'd had a very bad stroke. It would be impossible for someone who'd had a very bad stroke to really start working.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Once you take the logic...
If they wanted to.
Right, but if you take the logic to its logical end...
Well, you have to be a murderer to play a murderer.
Well, this is my point. So here we got Anthony Hopkins, who played Hitler. Right? I mean, are we legitimately saying that if you're going to play Hitler now in a movie, you have to be a Nazi? Similarly, The Sopranos. The Sopranos, you know, are we going to say now that they all had to be the senior Sopranos, genuine members of the mob?
Right, but on the other side, Piers, you've got to remember, yes, of course, we shouldn't be making rules about this. Yes, of course it's great for gay actors who've had quite a hard time, you know, historically, to be playing more roles, to be getting the gay... It's quite frustrating. I was frustrated. I remember going to see Colin Firth in the film by Tom Ford, and he invited me to a screening. I thought, well, thanks, Colin, that's the end of my career. Because, you know, that role really should have been mine. And then, so, you know, there's a frustration about that, of course.
And there's also a point I do get, which is what some disabled actors have made the point to me, that there's not the opportunity at the grassroots level, you know, for them to get on the right ladder to get them into a position where they may get these big roles because they're not perceived to be big enough box office stars. They find that the system is a bit oppressive to people. And I get that. I get the fact that maybe disabled actors do not get the same opportunities.
I get that too. But, I mean, the thing is, how is the business meant to change for that? I mean, it's quite complicated. No, you know, it's really frustrating if you're a disabled actor. And but I don't think the answer to Richard III in Stratford-on-Avon, for example, which Greg, the outgoing head of the RSC, said that it can only now be played by a disabled actor.
I just thought it was ridiculous to say that.
I think it would be I'd love to see it played by a disabled actor, by the way, but I don't see why it's one of the great roles that actors want to play. You know, acting is acting. Movies and television and cinema are a particular arm.
Isn't that the thing? That ultimately, acting should mean what it says on the tin.
It's acting.
That you, as an actor, one of the best in the business, you should be able to play any role, actually, right? Because, I mean, I look at things like the period drama Bridgerton, for example. When you look at Bridgerton now, it's actually a fantasy, in a way, in the sense that it has many black actors playing people that we know at the time were almost uniquely white feudal people, right? Lords and so on. I don't mind that at all. In the same way, I wouldn't mind if Idris Elba was the next James Bond. I would mind if they suddenly made James Bond a woman. In other words, there's going to be a kind of common sense valve here.
You wouldn't mind, or you would mind?
I would mind if it was a woman. It's like women should get their own spies, right? So you can't turn James Bond And I don't want him going non-binary or any other things. None of that. None of that. But I don't mind if it's a black actor playing Bond at all. I would think that's fine. Same way Bridgerton.
And same way Doctor Who is now a black gay actor.
Right.
And I think that's very exciting.
Yeah.
I think that will give Doctor Who a whole new impetus. Which
But that's
is exciting.
but that's a different thing. I don't think anyone really, as long as you're not a bigot, would have a problem with any of that. Let me just, while I've got you, I'm curious about your view. We've been talking a lot on the show about cancel culture, this sort of rather insidious phenomenon which has raised its ugly head. You've always been very outspoken. You've always been pretty uncensored in all the time I've known you. What do you feel about the society that we now operate in, these eggshells everyone feels they have to tread on?
I think it feels like the Stasi, to be honest. I think it feels incredibly repressive. I don't think it manages to achieve the aims that it's after. For example, I don't know. I've never met J.K. Rowling, for example, and I've never read her books. And I'm willing to bet that before this all happened, she was not someone who was anti-transsexual.
No.
Not remotely.
She's never said
Everything you
anything
know about
anti-trans
her,
at all.
nothing. So, but now she might be. She might easily be now.
Well, funny enough, I interviewed. There was a big scene outside the Emmeline Pankhurst statue in Manchester, where you had women's rights campaigners. We're going to have a little rally there, and you had these trans activists turn up. And I interviewed one of the trans activists who just was incredibly abusive on the show live, calling me all sorts of names and stuff. And I don't have a transphobic bone in my body. I want trans people to have equality and fairness, but I also want to safeguard women's rights. I don't think the two are incompatible.
No, but I think at a certain point now, it's reached a point where someone's got to start trying to make peace between these two groups. And I think the thing we tend to forget is that in the kind of 24-hour history of humanity, these 2 million years, the women's movement only started literally 3 seconds ago in that whole thing.
Yes.
So our brains are hardwired to something very anti-women too, in a way. So the trans movement has come right on the edge of the women's movement. In fact, they're probably, when you look at it from further in advance, the same thing.
We do. You're right, though. We need to bring the extremities of these debates
because
to a
I
more
don't believe
centrist
people
position.
are trans. These people, I think it's dangerous to call people TERFs when they're not, because you make them into it.
J.K. Rowling, to me, is not transphobic. She wants to safeguard women's rights, and she should be applauded for doing so. Rupert, we've run out of time. Great to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
You're looking in tremendous shape, I might add.
So are you.
Really good to see you. Thank you. Thank you for coming
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. I want to play Rupert Everett in a movie. Actually, I want you to play me in a movie. I mean, that would be good, actually.
I could.
You'd be good as me if you just, I don't know.
Lost some weight.
Great to see you.
Take care.
Oh, he's off. He's storming off.
Oh, am I meant to?
No, not yet. It's fine. I don't
sorry.
know. If you want to, it's the done thing. You can sit there for a bit if you like. It wasn't exactly the... But first, a new bombshell poll published today shows that nearly half of the King's realms would vote to become republics if they had the chance. Caribbean countries cite colonial ties as the reason for wanting to part with the monarchy. And pretty disturbingly for King Charles, 10 of the 14 countries polled say they back the Sussexes, saying Meghan's treatment exposes racist views. It's ignited debate about whether King Charles should apologise for Britain's past sins, maybe even pay reparations. Would that make any difference? Or would it just fuel the fire of republicanism? Well, here with me now to debate this, the former royal butler to Princess Diana, Paul Burrell, the activist and organiser of Black Lives Matter protests, Iman Ayton, and the historian and royal author, Dr. Tessa Dunlop. Well, this will be a quiet debate, won't it? Well, you brought your earplugs, Paul.
I won't get a look in.
Paul, let me start with you. I've got a problem with this constant looking back in history, feeling guilty for stuff that none of us in this era actually did, and then having to say sorry for everything that we didn't do, and even now, apparently having to pay people today for stuff that happened to their ancestors many generations before. I don't really get what that achieves.
We should learn from lessons of the past. We can't change anything, and we should move forward. But the Queen's greatest achievement, his mother's greatest achievement, was the Commonwealth of Countries. She was very proud of that. I think if you could beam her down now, she would say, my Commonwealth. That should survive intact into the King's reign. So he should do whatever he can. Now, bear in mind, I've known this man for a very long time.
Yeah.
He has a voice. and he will say what he
But
feels.
here's the real problem he's got. There's another voice yapping away about racism. Two voices. His son, Harry, and Harry's wife, Meghan, who for 3 years have branded the royal family a bunch of callous racists. That is now turning up in these polls because, understandably, frankly, black people in the Commonwealth around the world are going, whoa, really? They're racist, these people? And yet they haven't produced a shred of evidence for any of it.
You and I know the royal family are not racist. And you and I know that they pressed the racist button on the Oprah Winfrey show.
Yeah.
And they never apologised to the Queen.
Never.
She went to her grave thinking there was a racist in the royal family.
And after she died, they said...
What happened?
We never
didn't say that, the press said that.
Didn't mean to say it was racism.
Why didn't you correct it, Harry? Why didn't you tell your...
Well, we know why, because it made them... They weaponise racism and mental health to make themselves extremely rich.
I totally...
All right, come on. This is my problem. This has always been my problem with this racism narrative that these two have spun without any evidence, is that people around the world, particularly people of colour, they believe it. And why wouldn't they believe it? They're hearing the first person who wasn't a white royal bride say they're racist, these people. So then the damage is palpable, it's tangible, and it will lead, I think, if we're not careful, to a load of these countries becoming republics and the beginning of the end of the monarchy.
Thank you for your soliloquy.
No, thank you.
All right, no problem. So first and foremost, my feelings on the royal family and racism are not predicated on Harry and Meghan's willingness to identify it. That's the difference between me and you. We are talking about a country that was built off of racism, and we are referring to the oldest institution in this country that started it all. So that's the first thing. In terms of why black people and many others feel the way that we do, well, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy. OK? White supremacy. That is the reason. Let me just
Why
finish.
does it make any difference if King Charles says sorry? Or why does it make if he pays money? What difference does that make?
OK. So reparations...
How does that combat racism?
No, it actually does. So let me
The guy hasn't got a racist bone in his body. He's done more for racism than any public figure in the country. Why should he be paying for the sins of people hundreds of years ago?
OK, so can I finish?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, the monarchy is a symbol of white supremacy, which is what black people have had to contend with for the last 400 years, notwithstanding the fact that Elizabeth, or every king and queen, from Elizabeth I...
You think the last late queen was a model of white supremacy?
Let me finish my point. You just asked me several questions. Let me finish my point.
Well, answer the question,
Right,
then.
I'm getting there, so just finish.
Well, hurry
Let me
up.
just finish, OK?
Hurry up.
So, every king and queen, from Elizabeth I to William IV, has supported and profited off of slavery. So, this is about the fact that this country was built off of racism, and that's the point.
This country also
Wait, hold on a
led...
second. This country
You can't just keep
stems
talking.
No, because I haven't even finished my point.
You
Piers.
can't just
keep
make
interrupting.
outlandish
You
statements
keep
about our royal family and
interrupting.
not expect me to jump in.
Piers, you keep interrupting. Can I finish my point?
This country also led the world out of slavery.
OK, so can I finish my point?
A long time ago.
Can I finish my point, please?
Yes.
Perfect.
So please finish it.
I will. No problem. Just be patient. So, every single king and queen from Elizabeth I to William IV over a 270-year period supported the enslavement of Africans and profited as a result. So it doesn't... It doesn't take any genius. Hold on a second. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that this country was built off of racism and it stems from white supremacy, all of which is directly attributed to the crown, slavery, and colonialism. To answer your point, let me finish my point.
Keep talking.
Piers, you keep interrupting.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation.
Answer my question.
Let's have a conversation.
We need mediation here, guys.
You spoke about slavery. Let me answer the point.
I asked you a specific question. Why should King Charles be either apologising for what happened centuries ago or paying money for it?
OK, so what you're talking about is slavery. I'm not talking about slavery. Slavery can be traced back to Europe. The Greek slave trade, to be specific, in 400 BC, then the Roman Empire, and then we get to the Muslim conquest of 7th century.
And black people had slaves
So, what we're talking about,
right?
exactly. So I'm not talking about
slavery comes in many forms.
I am not talking about
there is
slavery.
a lot of slavery around today.
So I'll tell you what I'm talking about. I'm talking about colonialism, neo-colonialism, racism, racial disparities, and the racist system of oppression and exploitation of black people and white supremacist activities, which have been rebanded under the guise.
What's that got to do with King Charles?
I am telling you why he needs to apologise and pay reparations.
Why? What did he do?
Anything to do with slavery.
What did he do?
I'm telling you, colonialism, neo-colonialism,
he didn't do that.
Racial disparities and a racist system and white supremacist attitudes. That is the legacies of the crown, slavery and colonialism that still remains.
I understand.
Let me finally get my point across. Lord,
you've got your point across, but here's my point, my counterpoint to you. What's any of that got to do with King Charles, who actually has been, I think, one of the great standard bearers in royal history for actually promoting racial equality and tackling racial injustice.
So let me explain.
Yet you want him to be issuing grovelling apologies for people hundreds of years ago, and you want him to pay money.
Okay, so I think black people would be far more inclined to get over it if it wasn't for the fact that the legacies of the crown, slavery and colonialism still remain, which includes racism, racial disparities and the racist global system of oppression and exploitation of black people. Which
all right, you're not answering my question.
I am, but you don't want to accept it. That's the difference.
No,
That's the difference.
you haven't explained
You also have the wealth of economic expansion as a result of exploitation of black people. And you also have
speak now.
Hold on. You haven't even let me finish, Piers. No problem. No problem.
You've done 9/10 of the talking.
No, you didn't let me
Tessa,
finish. You didn't let me finish.
You've heard the debate.
I think you're both wrong, actually. On the one hand, we celebrate, and you certainly do, Piers, the idea of monarchy as continuity.
Yeah.
Going way back when. I mean, I read an article this week that traced the anointing oils to the Old Testament and King Solomon. You can't pick and choose which bits of that continuous historic line you like.
Yes, I can.
Well, how is that I'm wrong?
You can, but it's hugely, problematic.
And
I would counter to you where we have the face of history and the physical form of history in our royal family. When, for example, France, the Republic, outlawed slavery much later, and in the civil wars in America, that's what it took in America much later. So my point is, no, 2 seconds. Let me finish my point.
You see, you want to interrupt, but you interrupted me several times.
You did all the talking.
I see your hypocrisy right now. It's fine. I did all the talking.
I think what you
interrupting me.
What we're doing here is we're conflating an individual family with institutions of state. You can't expect a king to apologise. He doesn't have that power. He would have to be told to apologise by the government because it's an institution of state.
Do I have to? All right.
He's talked about sorry.
Excuse me. Time out. Time out.
Actively apologised.
Time out.
Time out. You keep talking about slavery. Let's just be clear about slavery. Yes, you did end slavery. You've made that point and you've made that point, so let me address it. You did end slavery, and there was a clause in the contract that said, for example, that Jamaicans had to work up to 45 hours a week for the following 4 years, whilst you simultaneously paid off the slave owners and left the enslaved in their countries to rot. And then you transition to colonialism, where slavery still continued, and then you transition to the Commonwealth, where you continue to assert your dominance, exploit black people, and do it in a far more dignified way.
There are also... Excuse me.
Nobody's refuting.
Can we all stop talking?
Nobody's refuting the repugnance of that.
Can we please time out? The biggest problem with slavery right now is there are between 7 to 10 million slaves in India. Last time I looked, that is not as a result of white supremacy causing modern-day slavery. I would rather we expend all our energy on current slavery issues than going back in the past, as we now do with... We now go back in the past for everything, wallowing in self-guilt about stuff that had nothing to do with us. Paul.
Yes. Legacies. You ignored that conveniently. Legacies of the crown, slavery and colonialism. You ignored that conveniently.
This is such a negative...
Legacies going back how far? How far do you want to go back?
400 years black people have been constant.
OK, so I want...
I told you that.
So do you think the Vikings should be paying me money for what they did to me?
See, you're talking about slavery. I am not. I already explained that.
I'm not talking about slavery.
I'm talking about colonialism,
You're not listening to me,
racism and racial disparities that still contend...
Stop shouting. You're not listening to what I said.
You're not listening to me.
Should the Vikings and the Romans also, through their modern-day ancestors, be paying me reparations for what they did to my family?
So I'm not talking about slavery, I'm talking about colonialism.
It's not slavery, you're not listening to me.
Yes, I am.
The Vikings and Romans didn't make us slaves.
No, yes, you're talking about the Roman Empire, which included
slavery. I'm talking about the Romans and the Vikings coming over here and causing immeasurable harm to my ancestors.
Empire and slavery.
Should Italians and Norwegians be paying me reparations?
In one sentence, Iman, in one sentence.
Go ahead.
What do you want? In one sentence, what's your idea?
Thank you, Tessa.
You want money?
You want money?
You want money?
Reparations.
Then I want money from the Vikings and the Romans. Paul,
I think
Paul, be very patient.
No, but the Commonwealth is a force for good.
Yes.
Commonwealth countries. Yes, it is. They do.
Absolutely.
They work for each other. It's a family, a community of families that help each other. That's why it was formed. And
no, you benefit more. That's why it's formed.
No, we don't benefit more. They benefit as well. They do benefit. Of course they do.
Paul.
Yes, they do.
Yes, I'm not saying that they don't. What I'm saying is that we benefit, you benefit, you benefit
Everyone
more.
benefits.
Exactly.
All right.
You benefit, you benefit, you benefit more. That's white supremacy.
How much money do you want from me?
That's what I keep talking about. Okay,
How much money do you want from
the
me?
National Commission on Reparations said that Jamaica, for example, is
How much do you want from me?
1.2 trillion.
How much do you want from me?
It's not about my feelings and not from you. I'm not. This isn't about me. And
We've all got to chip in, right? So,
But
how much do you want? How much money could I
I
give you for something that had nothing to do with me, right?
That's why I want it.
How much money could I give you to make racism better? Nothing.
Keep ignoring
is
that
the answer.
conveniently. We're talking about the legacies of the Crown-saving colonialism, which includes racism.
All right. I don't know why you've come on deciding to speak like a robot today, but it's not really working.
Because you don't listen. That's why.
But nor does talking to me like that. Doesn't work.
Okay, well,
right?
how about listening?
But I will happily
how about
pay.
listening?
If you could convince me that it will change racism one iota in this country, I will pay you a cheque for the damage inevitably that was done by my relatives when they weren't being attacked by Vikings and Romans. I will pay you reparations if I think you have any argument for why I should. And you know what? There isn't one.
Can I give you a response?
No, we've run out of time. That's it.
That's the point.
Guys, thank you all very much indeed. I have in my company someone who knows all about balls flying in the back of the net because he stopped most of them. He stopped most of them ever doing it. The greatest goalkeeper to ever grace the game of football in the world, bar none. Arsenal legend, England legend, David Safe Hands Seaman. What an honour to have the great man with me. David, welcome to you. And from Qatar, former Liverpool manager, of course, Graham Souness. And a presenter from the United Stand podcast, Adam Stott, who already looks like he's throwing daggers at me. It's going to be a lively encounter with him about what he thinks has happened to his club following this Ronaldo interview. Can I get him to thank Cristiano by the end for getting rid of the Glazers? It'll be a tough gig, but we'll see how we get on. Let me start with you, David. I don't want to talk about armbands. I'm done with armbands. Yep. I've said my bit about that. I want to talk to you about Cristiano Ronaldo because it is the dominant story in world sport. It's a dominant. Thank you. See, immediately, he immediately catches it. Do you see the way he swooped?
It was you that dropped
This is why these legends never lose it. Unbelievable. I just tested him. Look at that. The way he swept and put it back on. That's why he's called safe hands. It's interesting. You play with some great players. Yeah. You know, from Dennis Bergkamp to others. Let's start from the interview itself. If you'd been in a dressing room, one of the top players, Thierry Henry, Dennis Bergkamp, Tony Adams, if one of them had come out and done an interview like this, what would your reaction have been?
I would applaud him because he's talking the truth, and it's not the stuff. A lot of the stuff that he came out with wasn't stuff that we haven't heard. Yeah. You know, we've heard a lot of other experienced players moaning and criticising Man United for the way that the ground is, the way that the training... It was really interesting when he said about the training ground. I couldn't believe it, that the training ground at Carrington was the same as when he left, 15 or so years ago. That really shocked me, because, at Arsenal, I go in there every week now, and I see the improvement that they've done. You know, they've had an £18 million refurb.
And he was comparing it to what he experienced at Real Madrid and Juventus.
Exactly, yeah.
Where he said they would evolve all the time. Constant new technology, new diet, new nutrition. He wasn't having a pop at the chefs at United. He was having a pop at the food they were all preparing. He couldn't believe that they were just having the same stuff they were given 12 years before. Yeah,
and like I said, that shocked me, and that shouldn't be happening. And like you say, he's been all around the world and seen how everywhere's progressed. And then he comes back to his beloved Man United and nothing's changed.
He has no regrets whatsoever about doing the interview. No. I mean, I've spoken to him throughout the week. He's absolutely happy. He's glad he's got his freedom. He's glad it's over, albeit he still loves Manchester United as a club and he loves the fans. And he doesn't want any ongoing issue with them. And I suspect they'll calm down over time, as they did when Roy Keane did the same thing on Man United TV. But should he have done the interview, do you think?
I would say because he put his side over. You know, there was a lot of stuff in the interview that I saw that I didn't know about. I didn't know about how the way that he was being treated. You know, the stuff that was going on with Ten Hag. You know, the fact that, take for instance the substitution when he refused to go on. You know, as a footballer, he should never do that. You know, you've got to say, okay.
And he admitted that.
He had reason the week before. Yeah. You know, where he was told that I'm not putting you on because I respect you too much.
Yeah. So the next week he's thinking, well, he no longer respects me. Otherwise, why would he want me to come on? I want to play a clip before we go to Graham Souness. And this is of Roy Keane today. It was the first time he's had a chance to address Ronaldo leaving United. Listen to what he said.
Obviously, the interview was a tipping point for him, but that's it. You know, life goes on. Man United, a great club. Ronaldo's a great player. As you said, it's like a divorce. It's like the end of a relationship. We all know how that feels. And you go your separate ways. Life goes on. Great player for Man United. Should have probably left in the summer.
Yeah.
But that's the player's fault or the club's. It was never going to happen. The new manager was never going to play him. You cannot have Ronaldo as a sub or fringe player. It's just not right. It's just not right. And it's sad, but these things happen.
Graham Souness, thank you very much indeed for joining me again. Obviously, this is a fast-moving story and things have moved on again from when we last spoke. Ronaldo's now gone. Glazers may be selling up. Pretty tumultuous stuff over at United. But when you listen to what Roy Keane said there, I mean, that to me, I think he's right about, this stuff happens Pierce, and it's time to move on.
What did he say, Pierce?
Well, are you saying he sat on the fence a bit?
Yeah, I think which is very unusual for Roy.
Yeah.
He sat there and said that he's a great player, he's been a great servant, and not a lot else.
He did go on to say that he felt that he'd been mismanaged, Ronaldo, which is kind of what you've said as well about this. Now
well,
it's all...
I would certainly agree with that. My take is the same. Take on it is the exact same as when we spoke before, when I was on your show. I think the two of them got together when Ronaldo stated he wanted to leave in the summer. The two of them go in a room, him and the manager. They come out of that room. Two people leave the room, and two of them are satisfied with what they've agreed. They lose to Brighton, they lose to Brentford, and all of a sudden it's chaos at Man United. I think the manager panicked, his coaching staff panicked. We need not so much a victim, but we need to analyse where we're going wrong, and I think they've come up with the wrong analysis. I think they've looked at, we can't press with Ronaldo on our team. Now, my take on it as a football person, I don't believe Ronaldo, even at 37, I don't think Man United can be doing without Ronaldo at this time in their development, where they want to be. I think it's been an enormous case of mismanagement. I think it's an enormous case of lack of speaking to each other, communication. If the manager and the staff have decided after 2 games, because they've lost 2 games, we're going to go a different route, after having agreed with Ronaldo before any games are played, they had to communicate that to Ronaldo. Because what happened after that was you've touched on already. They don't bring him on against Man City. They ask him to go on against Tottenham. A week after that, or 10 days after that, they ask him to be captain. They are really mixed messages for a player to accept.
Yeah.
And when the word disrespect was used by Ronaldo, I think that's saying that someone has gone back on their words. And who can it be? It can only be the Man United manager.
Right.
He has changed whatever he said before a ball was kicked to where he got to the situation where he came out and made his statement with you. Disrespect. I think someone's changed their minds on it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, let's go to Adam Stott, presenter of United Stand.
And I think that's where the anger comes from.
Right.
Pierce, I have to say that I think the stuff about swimming pools and kitchen, that really doesn't come into the argument why he's leaving Man United. He's leaving Man United because he still feels he's a football nut. We know that.
Yeah.
Look at him, he's a specimen. There is not out there, and I've said this again, there is not a better example you could have in your dressing room. Surely you want to keep that. Man United are a country mile away from where they need to be as the great football club that they are. They ain't going to be winning the Champions League anytime soon. They will not be winning the Premier League anytime soon. Ronaldo is a role model. You'd have to explain this to him. I want you here because this, that and that. Him as a role model, you could not name me a better one in the history of football.
Right.
Not in this generation, in the history of football.
Yeah.
For me, I would have fought to keep him. I would have pleaded with him to stay because I need you. If you're a young fella in that dressing room, prior to Ronaldo turning up, who do you look at in the dressing room and say, in 10 years' time, I want to be like him? So Ronaldo turns up, everyone in the dressing room says, in 10 years' time, I want to be like him. I think it's a mistake in letting him go, but time will tell.
Interesting stuff, Graham. Thank you. Let's go to Adam Stott. Well, Adam, look, don't listen to what I have to say about this. I'm an Arsenal fan. I don't really care how tumultuous things get at United, but I'm also an interviewer. And I sat with Ronaldo, and he gave me his side. In his eyes, he was correcting a lot of untruths that had been said about him. So it was more a riposte, if you like, a rebuttal of a lot of things. As a United fan, what's your feeling about all this?
Yeah, I mean, I look at him listening to what Graham said there at the start of the season, and Ronaldo in your interview, Piers, went on about the start of the season. No, pre-season was why, and he understood why he didn't start the season. But in the Brighton game, he played 37 minutes. The Brentford game, he played the full 90. We lost both of them games. It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. We just went back to basics. Ten Hag went to the training ground and thought up a different plan. Ronaldo didn't start the next 4 games. The next 4 games, Manchester United won and turned their season around. The manager has to make a decision for the better of the team. And if that doesn't involve Cristiano Ronaldo at that time, then that's down on the manager. And it worked for the manager. People were being over the top with Ten Hag's team selection for the Liverpool game. I remember talking to Graham Souness just on the eve of that game with the protests, and Graham Souness thought that the protest would be a hindrance on Manchester United going into that game. It didn't. The crowd came together and they got behind the team, and that team didn't have Cristiano Ronaldo in it. The fans got behind whoever was on that pitch that wanted to give it 100%, and there is a general consensus within the United fan base. Ronaldo hasn't been giving that 100%, whether that be for his opinion on how he's been treated. The fans are seeing what's going on the pitch more. We don't see everything on behind the scenes, obviously, but what counts is what happens on the pitch. And he hasn't been performing this season in particular. And the team is playing better without Ronaldo.
I mean, you say that. Look, you say that. I'm in a blissful position of Arsenal being top of the league by 5 points and 11 points clear of United.
Yep.
You've got to go to the playoffs now against Barcelona.
We beat you without Ronaldo.
Right, you've got to get to the playoffs against Barcelona in the Europa League, which you may lose. I'm not quite sure this constitutes a great revolution so far. Ten Hag is completely unproven outside of Holland. And the point that Graham made, which really resonated with me, and I think I know the answer, is that if you're in that dressing room, why wouldn't you see him as the greatest role model there's ever been? Actually, one of the big concerns Ronaldo had was, unlike him, when he walked into that dressing room as an 18-year-old and saw Scholes and Giggs and Keane and Ferdinand and wanted to soak all he could off them in terms of experience and expertise. A lot of these young United players earn too much money and don't care and didn't really want to do that with him. I found that staggering.
Yeah, no, I can understand that side of it. And when Ronaldo did that interview, one of the many few he did last season, saying that the younger players didn't want to take his advice, I was fully on board with that. The problem that we've had with Ronaldo is the fact we didn't think he should have done the interview with yourself, Piers, in the way it was. He was under contract at Manchester United. He talked about the times have changed since Sir Alex Ferguson left the football club. I guarantee he wouldn't have done this interview with yourself if Sir Alex Ferguson was still manager of the football club. It's what we've seen as like going behind the manager's back. The fans support the manager. We support the manager. He's the biggest man at this football club. Famous words that came out of Sir Alex Ferguson's mouth. And that's who the fans will be behind. If
you'll support him
until upset about not being in the team.
You'll support him until you get rid of him, like the last few you've had. I mean, let's be honest. Every manager since Ferguson has had your universal support, United fans, right to the point they've been slung out. That's been part of the problem. But look, Graham, you've been shaking your head listening to some of this. Do you want to riposte?
No. Sorry, what's the chap? What's the United
Adam
supporter
Stott.
called? Hi, Adam. Adam, I think what you said. A lot of it is correct. It's the manager's decision to go down a different route if he feels his team are not at it, or it's not working his game plan. But where I'm coming from, I think he has to communicate that to Ronaldo. Listen, we had that conversation. I think that's the word disrespect sticks in my head.
Yeah.
That's saying someone by deed or words is not carried through on what they're either going to do or say. And I think they had an agreement. 2 games later, the manager has changed and gone down a different route. That is a manager's prerogative. But I think at that time, it's not been, from the outside looking in, I don't know anything, that's not being communicated to Ronaldo, because if it had been communicated to Ronaldo, I don't think the word disrespect would come out. And I think you said you turned the season round. I think you turned it round from the first 2 games that you lost, picked up a few points. But I've been in dressing rooms. I constantly see when I'm on television that you cannot be successful as a manager stroke coach unless you've got good senior pros. That is a fact of life as I see it, and I think it has borne out if you look at the clubs that have been successful. You look at your club over the years, here's a perfect example.
Yeah.
He keeps Gary Neville a couple of years and I'm going to go and have dinner with him after this. He'll be upset. He kept Gary Neville maybe 2 years longer than he should have done. Paul Scholes left and brought him back. He kept Ryan Giggs on until he was about 35, 36, because they had good senior pros who made sure people turned up on time, trained properly, they were at it every day in training, and their attitude to games when it mattered. You need good senior pros, and I come back to it, you could not get a better example of a good senior pro than Ronaldo.
Yeah.
And also, when he was sent to train with the kids, the word is he was nigh on perfect the way he trained with the kids.
I heard that.
So I come back to it. You cannot have enough good senior pros.
Graham, I've got to leave it there. Adam, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate it. Final word to you, David. Last night, I was sitting next to you when news broke that Ronaldo was now available.
Yep.
And your immediate reaction was, well, we should take him at Arsenal for the rest of the season.
Totally. I was like, we'd have him, and we both agreed.
I totally agree.
You know, even like listening to Graham there, you know, he's talking about Ronaldo is not done. He's far from done. You know,
and we actually need a good natural predatory goal scorer.
He'd be perfect for Arsenal, you know, and he'll be perfect to a lot of other clubs.
Yes.
You know, where he gets the respect.
Yeah, I
you know,
agree.
you never heard any players moaning about Sir Alex Ferguson about a lack of respect.
No, absolutely right. We're going to leave you, David Seaman, with a replay of your brilliant save of my pen. Let's have a look at this.
World sport. It's a dominant.
Down you go. Look at that. Instant. I mean, it was so fast.
Clean catch, clean catch.
David, great to see you.
Pleasure,
really
mate.
appreciate
Thank
you coming in, mate. I mentioned earlier about Jeremy Clarkson, who, I get on fine with Clarkson now, but just to remind viewers, he did punch me in the head, and I've got a scar here, which comes up when I have a tan like I do now from his right fist. So it's not like we've been the easiest of easiest of bedfellows over the years. I've literally borne the scars of Clarkson. So I'm not going to be his greatest cheerleader in a moment of misfortune. All I would say is this, is that he could not have issued a more sincere apology than he did today. And as I've always suspected about the Woke Brigade, the moment you do that, they don't accept it. And by the way, Harry's the king of the wokies. They just chuck it straight back in your face. And I mean, Tessa, we didn't discuss this, but here's my problem with it. Can't he apologise enough? I mean, is there no apology that's acceptable?
Did you not rummage around in the small print? It's because the Grand Tour's apparently been pulled by Amazon Prime. That apology.
Well, we don't know. That's not been confirmed yet.
Come on,
not
wake up and smell the coffee.
I'd rather wait and have it confirmed.
Why do you think Clarkson apologised? Why deep down in your tippy-top?
Do you think he should be cancelled from everything?
To be honest, I think we've had quite a lot of Clarkson over the years, and time to bring on a fresh lot. Yeah, I would have no problem.
But do you think he should be cancelled for that reason?
He's not been cancelled. He's still platformed every
week.
You were just boasting about him being cancelled.
But do you think he should be cancelled?
I think maybe if the Amazon Prime think it's time for them to shuffle off, then perhaps it's...
Well, we don't, like I say, they haven't confirmed that. I mean,
you wouldn't answer the question. Do you think he should?
Well, that's a good question.
I think there should be a punishment for that level of vitriol. I would like to see... And don't shoot me there. I would like to see some modification to include misogyny in those hate laws.
Really?
We're talking on a day.
Okay.
Yeah,
No,
we are.
We're
talking on a day when the term institutional misogyny is being touted around in the police.
So what about all the hideously misogynistic things that Harry says in his book?
Oh, not back to that. Not back to the prep school teacher whom he made laugh.
Yeah.
When he was 11 years old.
No, the one
Would you have preferred that Harry whitewashed
Tessa,
his
you've got to let me
childhood?
finish. I'm talking about the matron that he called ugly and greasy and didn't make the boys horny. I'm talking about the newspaper executive who he's absolutely viciously misogynist about. I'm talking about Camilla, who he calls a dangerous villain. Blah, 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 blah. The book is laced with misogyny.
No.
So I agree with you.
Can't be one rule for one
misogyny
and
should
one
be
for
taken
another.
more seriously. What about he starts with himself?
No. First of all, would you have preferred that he pretended he was a saint at prep school and never did that
That wasn't my question.
Lord of the Flies
It
star
wasn't my
behaviour that
question.
children do?
My
Would you
question-
have preferred?
No,
What
Tessa.
about the
I didn't.
matron?
Tessa,
Do you know,
my question to you was very simple. Why should he be allowed to be a misogynist?
I didn't.
But anyone who dares to be a misogynist about his wife, he wants to get
I
cancelled.
just don't think you can compare the
All right.
idea of someone
Of course you can't.
being cellular, liked on a cellular level,
Of course.
paraded down the street naked,
Of course.
having human
me
excrement
tell
thrown
you,
at her,
yeah.
with describing a tabloid
Actually-
editor as something. I don't
Actually,
know what was
what he
as?
said about a female editor was actually pretty
But
well
was
up
it
there.
sexist? It
And
was
there's
just
not even-
unpleasant.
Oh, stop
Actually, it was
talking over each
misogynist, sexist and revolting, yeah. But anyway, let's move on. I want to talk to Stephen Bates. Roberts, former Guardian royal correspondent. Stephen, I didn't even know the Guardian had a royal correspondent, so that was a bit of a shock to me. So congratulations on that title. But thank you for joining me. Look, I wanted to get you on, not because I expect you to launch a spirited, full frontal defence of tabloid newspapers, but I do think you raised very interesting points in your column about all this, which is that Harry's real point of visceral hatred is that the British tabloids in particular were directly to blame for Princess Diana, his mother's death. And you wrote a column really saying that isn't borne by facts.
No, that's right. I mean, I watched the ITV interview the other Sunday, like millions of other people did. And as you see, we had this riff about the tabloids and the paparazzi causing his mother's death. That wasn't actually what I discovered and found. I was the Guardian's man in Brussels at the time, and I was sent down first thing that morning to help the coverage, of course. And I got on into a cab at the Gare du Nord to go to the Guardian office. And the cabbie, this is 5 or 6 hours after the accident, said that driver must have been mad to drive into that tunnel at that speed. He said there's a very bad camber and there's a twist in the tunnel, and anyone who drives in at that sort of speed, you have to stick to 30 kilometres an hour, he said. Anyone who went in at the sort of speed that car was being driven at must have been mad. And we now know, after the inquest, which I also covered 8 years later at the High Court, that Henri Paul, the chauffeur that evening, was high on drink and drugs. He hadn't been expecting to work, which was why he was drunk, and he'd never driven a Mercedes before. And Mohammed Al Fayed instructed him to drive Dodi and Diana right across Paris, a route he didn't particularly know, in a very fast car that he wasn't used to driving. He had a Mini himself, and he showed off. He was showing off to the paparazzi who were outside the Ritz Hotel. They could have stayed at the Ritz Hotel because they had a suite there. They were routed out of the suite by Mohammed Al Fayed, who wanted them to stay at his apartment. And that was the terrible thing that happened.
And the other crucial thing, I think...
versus...
And the other point I was going to make, which I think is really important to this, is that Harry talks sort of vaguely about there were flashing lights as his mother and the car she was in crashed. In fact, the paparazzi were not within 1 kilometre of the car when it crashed. That came out in the inquest. So there were none of them anywhere near the tunnel or the car. Yeah. What is completely true is that once they caught up with the car and they realised it had crashed, then some of these ghouls did actually try and take pictures of Diana lying in the back of the car. Right. And that is completely unforgivable. But it's not true that they were right with the car as it went into the tunnel, blinding the driver potentially with their flashbulbs.
That's absolutely right. They were on Vespers. Vespers don't outrun Mercedes being driven at speed. They were behind. They were admittedly chasing the Mercedes, probably trying to catch up with it at lights or something like that. But they weren't in front of it. And so therefore, they didn't cause the accident. They indeed did behave like ghouls afterwards. These were continental paparazzi, it has to be said. They weren't British journalists. They weren't British photographers. They were Italians and French. Right. Maybe they wanted to sell photographs to the British tabloids, but I doubt very much whether the British tabloids, which by then had learnt their lesson,
I can tell you. I can tell you for a fact that I was in the Daily Mirror newsroom in the early hours of that morning, about 5 a.m., when we were offered pictures of Diana lying in the back of the car. Didn't know if she was dead or alive at that stage. It turned out she actually died, I think, on the way to hospital when she got to hospital. But these pictures were offered to us, and I not only refused to even countenance using them, I rang the head of the agency who'd sent them in, advised him very strongly to withdraw them from everywhere he'd sent them and to leave the country and keep his head down because it might cost him his entire business. So this idea that we were sitting there and salivating over pictures of Diana in the back of the car is completely untrue.
There are many things you can blame the tabloids for about their royal coverage of Diana and Charles and the breakup of all that marriage, but that is not one of them. It seems to have embittered Harry very deeply. You can understand that, but as I think you were saying earlier, it's probably time, unfortunately, that he should get over it.
Well, you know, I would never tell anyone to get over the death of a parent and that thing, but I certainly think that him continuing to apportion direct blame on a particular section of the British media for the crash that killed his mother is just, unfortunately, it's not borne out by the facts. Jenny Bond, you were covering... Stephen, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Jenny, you listening to all that? You were obviously covering all this. I mean, to me, it's a very important point. You can have a view, as Harry and William both do, that the paparazzi are the enemy for them because they follow them all around at all times. And obviously Diana got more attention than I think anybody else did. And the rules did all change after she died, actually. But that doesn't mean that the press, the British press, were to blame for her death. That's just not true.
No, it's not true, and I've never bought into the conspiracy theory whatsoever, but Harry seems to want to revive that. He was traumatised by what happened, however it happened, and he has not been able to get over it. And for that, that's why I say we have to have some sympathy with him. But, you know, in the book he suggested that he would like, and William would like, to have the inquest reopened, or the inquiry reopened, though he doesn't know what you gain from it. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But I don't know how he will ever be reconciled with what happened to his mother. Never mind be reconciled.
No, well, you have to... Look, Jenny, thank you very much for joining me. I mean, look, the bottom line, Anne, you've got to stick to facts. The inquest was unbelievably thorough.
And she wasn't wearing a seatbelt.
And she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The car was speeding. The driver was drunk and had drugs in his body. And he was basically... He lost control of the car on a bump in the underpass. I mean, that's what happened.
It is... Go. Sorry.
The one person who survived that crash was the only person who was wearing a seatbelt.
I interviewed him. I had the first interview with Trevor Rees-Jones, the bodyguard.
And does he uphold Harry's version?
Well, he wore the seatbelt and that saved his life. The others weren't wearing seatbelts.
But does he does he say that they were trying to escape the paparazzi?
No, because
that's
they
the point
weren't.
I'm trying to make.
The paparazzi were over a kilometre behind them. They were nowhere near the car. So it wasn't the paparazzi. And by the way, as Stephen rightly pointed out, these weren't British press. These were foreign paparazzi.
But just talking about this, reliving it, even in a sort of fourth-hand version, it's horrific, it's painful. I think what we need to do is, I know this is going to be difficult for you, Piers, and perhaps you too, Anne, but is cut Harry some slack, lift ourselves above the parapet and think, what is the royal family for? It is our first family. It's a great British brand. Do we want it to look magnanimous? Do we want it to represent redemption and forgiveness? If we do,
what about him?
If
he's not forgiving. He's not being magnanimous. He's doing none of that. He's doing none of that.
And I can tell you the best way to do that is not to invite those two anywhere near the coronation. But thank you, Tessa. Thank you, Anne. Appreciate you coming in. Still to come, the Brit Awards goes gender neutral to be more inclusive and with obvious predictability. All 5 nominees for Best Artist identify as men. Do gender-neutral awards exclude women? We are going to have a gender-neutral panel if these two carry on. Go on, give each other a hug.
No, that's certainly not. I don't do that.